The lobby of 325 Lexford Plaza shimmered like a cathedral of glass and ambition. Morning light poured through the tall panes, dancing across marble floors polished to perfection. Every sound in the air carried the confidence of corporate order. The click of heels, the ding of elevators, the quiet hum of people who thought they belonged. Then came a sentence sharp enough to slice through that quiet. "You don't belong in this elevator. I need you to step out, now." Her voice cracked like crystal under tension, bright, brittle, and loud enough to claim authority. Conversations halted mid-laugh. Coffee cups froze mid-air. Someone's phone slipped from their hand and clattered against the marble. All eyes turned toward the sound. At the center of the silence stood a man, tall, calm, still, dressed in a black crewneck and pressed slacks. He carried nothing but a slim leather notebook in one hand, his other resting loosely in his pocket. No badge, no name tag, no display of belonging. Across from him, the receptionist blocked the elevator doors, one hand braced against the sensor to keep them open. Her grey blazer hugged her frame like armor, her corporate ID swinging like a shield. The words she'd just spoken hung between them, heavy, decisive. She didn't look confused. She looked certain. "This is for executives only," she repeated, voice tighter now. "You can use the service elevator at the back. This one isn't for contractors." That last word, contractors, wasn't about policy. It was about place. It was code for "you don't fit here." The man didn't move, didn't blink. His calmness wasn't arrogance. It was precision, the stillness of someone who knew exactly what he was walking into. Around them the lobby waited, breath held, eyes flicking between the woman and the man in black. He finally spoke. "I have a meeting on the 23rd floor." Just that. No apology, no explanation. A statement, not a defense. And that's what made her uneasy. Because his tone didn't waver, because he didn't shrink, because deep down she didn't expect him to answer with confidence, only compliance. At the front desk, a young associate holding a latte froze mid-step. The silence felt wrong now. The tension wasn't confusion. It was assumption, and everyone could feel it. From near the fuchsia plant by the window, an intern shifted nervously. His phone, tilted just slightly upward, began recording. Something in his gut told him this moment would matter. "Sir," the receptionist pressed again, her voice louder, more shrill now. "You either step out voluntarily, or I'll have you removed." He didn't move. Not out of stubbornness, out of conviction, because this was exactly what he'd come here for. And in 20 minutes, the entire lobby would understand why. His name was Malcolm Reed, and today he wasn't here for a meeting, he was here for a reckoning. Malcolm hadn't planned to draw attention, no entourage, no assistant, no announcement, just him, his notebook, and a quiet morning. The black crewneck wasn't laziness, it was intention, neutral, clean, respectable, but forgettable. His leather shoes polished but unbranded, his demeanor calm, detached, watchful. He looked like someone blending in, which was precisely the point. 15 years ago, Malcolm Reed had founded R&R Holdings from a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, a one-room furnace with more ideas than funding, where ambition outlasted sleep. Today, that company spanned 12 countries, employed 40,000 people, and held $18 billion in assets. Yet this morning, when he stepped into his own building, the one with his company's name etched across 10 floors, he was told he didn't belong. And that was exactly the test. He'd come early, unannounced, because lately he'd been hearing whispers, quiet complaints from junior staff, 3 of them in the same month, all black or brown, all describing small moments of exclusion that didn't make headlines but cut deep. They told me to wait for someone to escort me. They said the executive floor was off limits. They asked if I was a courier. Minor things, they said, but Malcolm knew better. Disrespect never enters the room shouting. It walks in through tone and timing, through the question behind the question. Who do you think you are? So he came to see it himself, not through reports or HR memos, but through eyes, through people, and now it was unfolding exactly as he suspected. You can't just say you have a meeting, the receptionist insisted, exasperated. Anyone can say that. From the corner, the young intern's phone trembled in his hand. He didn't know who the man was, but he knew injustice when he saw it. He angled the camera lower, capturing the moment like instinct. Malcolm's gaze met his for half a second. The intern gave a slight nod. Solidarity, silent and pure. It was enough. Back in the elevator, the doors began to slide shut again. The receptionist lunged forward, her hand cutting the air. "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again." Malcolm didn't move, but his voice came low, deliberate, controlled. "Carla, log everything. We're starting now." His thumb tapped the spine of his notebook twice. Somewhere, a system came alive, invisible, but very real. The receptionist blinked. "What did you just say?" Before Malcolm could answer, a new voice sliced through the tension. Sharp, professional, caffeinated. "Is there a problem here?" Heads turned. The office manager, Jana Corbin, stormed out from behind the glass desk. Clipboard in one hand, tablet in the other, her heels clicked with authority. She'd worked here for 12 years and wore her seniority like a badge. He tried to take the executive elevator without checking in, the receptionist explained quickly. "I asked for ID, he refused." Jana gave Malcolm a cold once-over. Her eyes scanned from his shoes to his shirt to the leather notebook. Then she delivered her verdict. "Sir, you're not cleared for this elevator. I'll have to ask you to wait in the lower lobby." Malcolm's expression didn't change. "I told her. I have a meeting on the 23rd. "Do you have a name for the meeting?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "No," he said softly, "but the meeting is mine." Her brow furrowed. The words didn't compute, so she defaulted to the only language authority knows: control. "I'm going to need to verify your credentials." She turned away, tapping furiously on her tablet. Behind her, the intern whispered into his phone's mic, capturing every word. The tremor in his hand betrayed the adrenaline in his veins. Malcolm waited, still as a mountain. "I'll wait here while you do." But Jana's tone sharpened, slicing the air. "Sir, I'm not going to debate this in front of staff. Step away now, or I'll call security." The receptionist crossed her arms behind her boss. The alliance of assumption was complete. Malcolm exhaled slowly. Then came the line that shifted the entire room's temperature. "That's because you didn't ask. You just assumed." A murmur rippled through the lobby. Conversations stilled. A current of discomfort passed through every watching face. And from the corner, the intern whispered what everyone was starting to realize. "He's not the one out of place, they are." The receptionist's jaw tightened. She looked back at Jana as if for permission. Jana, sensing her authority slipping, raised her voice, louder this time, theatrical. "Security will be here shortly." She wanted an audience. She got one. Malcolm remained motionless, not in resistance, but in ownership. The kind that doesn't have to prove itself. The elevator doors finally closed behind him with a muted chime, not in defeat, in patience. He turned and found a leather bench near the windows, sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and opened his notebook. The act was simple, quiet, devastating, because it said, "I belong here. I always did." The next few minutes were a slow unraveling. Jana's fingers drummed against her clipboard. The receptionist whispered in panic. The intern kept recording, now with both hands. The tension spread like ink through water. From across the lobby, a woman in a rust-colored trench coat looked up from her laptop, her brow furrowed. She leaned to the man beside her. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Another employee, mid-30s, loosened his tie and leaned against a pillar. He wasn't hiding. He was bearing witness. "He's just sitting there," the intern murmured to his mic, not saying a word, and they called security. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of truth, the kind that burns quietly. Malcolm flipped a page in his notebook, pen moving slow and steady. Behind him, the elevator that had started it all chimed softly. Nobody entered. "What's your full name again?" Jana snapped, trying to reclaim control. Malcolm looked up. "I'm not refusing," he said calmly. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." Even the intern flinched at that one. It wasn't loud, but it landed. Jana blinked, thrown off her rhythm for the first time. Malcolm stood, smooth and deliberate, walked toward the far side of the lobby, and sat again. Not a retreat, a repositioning. The authority she thought she owned was evaporating, replaced by something heavier, realization. And somewhere inside that building, a clock had just started counting down. The night sky over downtown Atlanta shimmered with the kind of rain that made streetlights look like melted gold. Inside the penthouse office of Reed Holdings, the city's heartbeat pulsed through the glass walls like a distant drum. Malcolm Reed stood at the window, his reflection split between storm and skyline. A man divided between vengeance and vision. He hadn't spoken much since the incident, not to his assistant, not to the PR team, not even to the legal department. The video of him being accused, that humiliating, gut-wrenching moment in his own store, had already gone viral. "Black CEO accused of theft in his own jewelry store," the headlines screamed. The world loves irony, especially when it hurts someone who worked their whole life to prove he belonged. Malcolm's phone vibrated again. Another news alert. Another viral post. His face, confused, angry, silent, frozen in a million reposts. He turned the phone off and let it fall onto the marble floor with a dull thud. He didn't need noise tonight. He needed clarity. "Sir," came a hesitant voice from the doorway. It was Naomi, his chief of staff, sharp, loyal, and one of the few people who dared to speak when his silence grew heavy. "They've issued a statement," she said softly. "The store claims it was a misunderstanding. They've suspended the employee." Malcolm didn't turn around. "Suspended?" His voice was a whisper, sharpened with steel. "Not fired, not prosecuted, suspended." Naomi swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. The media is calling it an unfortunate racial miscommunication. They—" "Enough," he said quietly, cutting her off like a blade through glass. He finally turned. His eyes, calm, unreadable but burning underneath, met hers. "Naomi, book me a meeting with the mall's board. Tomorrow morning. No press, no leaks." Naomi blinked. "The mall's board, sir? You mean the management company?" "No," Malcolm said, slipping his cufflinks into place with mechanical precision. "The owners." She hesitated. "That mall is owned by Northcrest Capital, sir, one of the biggest real estate groups in the state." Malcolm's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but something colder. "Then let's see what their price of shame is." The next morning, the rain had washed the streets clean but left the city raw. A black Rolls-Royce slid into the underground garage of the Northcrest Tower. Cameras flashed, lenses turned, whispers followed. Everyone had seen the viral clip by now. Everyone knew who Malcolm Reed was. He wasn't just a CEO. He was the CEO, founder of Reed Holdings, owner of half a dozen tech firms, luxury retail chains, and a shipping empire that spanned 3 continents. The man who started with nothing but a scholarship and a dream from Atlanta's South Side. And yet, One uniformed clerk's suspicion had reduced him to a suspect in his own store. He walked through the marble corridors like a storm in a suit, silent, precise, unstoppable. His entourage followed: Naomi, 2 attorneys, and his security head. By the time they reached the boardroom, even the receptionist's breath had gone shallow. The North Crest board was already waiting: 5 men, 2 women, all in tailored suits that smelled of old money and quiet arrogance. "Mr. Reed," the chairman said, standing up just enough to be polite but not enough to show respect, "this is unexpected." Malcolm placed his briefcase on the table and sat down slowly. "I believe the mall in which the incident occurred is under your portfolio, correct?" The chairman adjusted his glasses. "Technically, yes, but it's managed by a tenant consortium. You see," Malcolm held up a hand, "I don't care about management. I care about ownership." He leaned forward, voice calm, but each word hit like a gavel. "I'm offering to buy it, the entire property, market rate, cash." The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum. One of the board members laughed nervously. "Mr. Reed, that mall alone is worth close to—" "I know what it's worth," Malcolm interrupted. "That's why I want it." Another member frowned. "And may I ask why?" "Out of personal anger." Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. "Because I don't like being a guest in buildings I can afford to own." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. He opened the briefcase, revealing a folder of documents. "The funds are liquid. The offer expires in 24 hours. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, with all due respect, such decisions take weeks." 24 hours, Malcolm repeated. Then he stood. "I built empires faster than that." By evening, the story was everywhere again, but this time the tone had changed. Malcolm Reed moves to buy entire mall after racial profiling incident. From humiliation to ownership, CEO makes billion-dollar power move. The same faces that had mocked him yesterday were now scrambling to call it inspirational. But Malcolm wasn't doing it for them. He wasn't doing it for likes or redemption. He was doing it because power, real power, is the only apology some people understand. Naomi entered his office again that night, her tablet glowing with updates. "Sir, North Crest accepted. They'll sign tomorrow." He didn't smile. He didn't even nod. He just said quietly, "Prepare a press statement. I'll address the media myself." Naomi tilted her head. "Sir, are you sure you want to speak? The internet's already—" "Let them watch," Malcolm said, turning back toward the window. The skyline glittered beneath him like a crown. "They watched me be humiliated. Now they'll watch me own the stage." The next morning, the world gathered outside the Reed Holdings tower. Reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers filled the plaza. When Malcolm stepped out, wearing a black suit that mirrored the city's glass, the crowd erupted in flashes. He took the podium, calm as ever. "2 days ago," he began, "I was mistaken for a thief. In a store I own, in a mall I helped build. I was told to prove my worth in a place my taxes paid for." He paused. The silence was heavy, reverent. "Today," he continued, "I'm here to announce that I've acquired full ownership of the North Crest Mall, including that same store. And effective immediately, all employees, from janitors to managers, will undergo a new program under Reed Holdings' values of dignity, respect, and equality." Applause broke out, slow but building like thunder. Cameras clicked. He didn't flinch under the light. He had lived in shadows too long to fear brightness. "And as for the employee who made the accusation," he added, voice soft but sharp, "I don't want her fired. I want her educated. Sometimes ignorance isn't punished, it's corrected." The crowd erupted again, this time with awe. He stepped back, leaving microphones scrambling to catch his last words. "Ownership," he said, looking straight into the lenses, is the best revenge. That night, Naomi found him in his office again. Same window, same skyline. "You could have destroyed them," she said softly. "Instead, you turned it into a lesson." Malcolm's reflections smirked faintly. Revenge burns fast. Legacy lasts longer. He turned, the city's lights painting him in gold. "Chapter 2, he murmured, almost to himself, "wasn't about them. It was about me." And outside, the city that once looked down on him now carried his name on its tallest building. 3 months had passed since the storm. The scandal had faded from headlines, the hashtags gone quiet, and the world, as it always does, had moved on. But Malcolm Reed had not. The mall he now owned was booming. Every store, every corridor, every glass panel bore his fingerprint. The employees who once looked down on him now greeted him with nervous smiles. The walls that once whispered behind his back now echoed with his name. And yet, beneath the success, something hollow lingered. He had won, but victory didn't feel like peace. One evening, as the city's dusk spilled into his penthouse, Malcolm sat alone. No press, no applause, no cameras. Just silence. On his desk lay a single envelope, ivory paper, sealed with a gold crest. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Mr. Reed, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want understanding. I was the one who accused you that day. I've spent weeks thinking about it. I was raised to see color before character, and I'm ashamed of it now. I'm in therapy. I lost my job, my friends, my peace. But if your speech meant what it sounded like, that ignorance can be corrected, then I'd like to learn. Sincerely, Alyssa Beck." Malcolm read it twice, then a third time. Her name, once venom, now trembled like a ghost between his fingers. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Power can silence your enemies, but only forgiveness can silence your demons. He placed the letter down and stared out at the glittering skyline. For the first time in months, his chest loosened. The next morning, Reed Holdings' lobby was busier than usual. Investors, reporters and executives flooded in for the annual Vision Summit, an event where Malcolm unveiled new projects. Cameras flashed, voices buzzed. But today, there was a different kind of energy in the air. Anticipation, not fear. Naomi stood at the podium, poised and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Reed Holdings, Mr. Malcolm Reed." Thunderous applause followed. Malcolm stepped up, sleek in a charcoal suit, but his tone carried more warmth than pride. "3 months ago," he began, "I learned that even success doesn't protect you from perception, that the color of your skin can still be mistaken for a shadow. But I also learned that power isn't about revenge. It's about rewriting the rules." The audience leaned forward, hanging on his every word. "Today," he continued, "I'm announcing the Reed Fellowship Program, scholarships, mentorships and leadership training for young black entrepreneurs across America. I want to make sure that the next Malcolm Reed doesn't have to buy the mall just to be treated like he belongs inside it." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, standing ovations, the kind that came from hearts, not hands. Malcolm smiled faintly. For the first time, he felt it. Purpose, not just power. Later that evening, after the event, Naomi entered his office carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To new beginnings," she said, handing him one. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "You sound sentimental today." Naomi smiled. "You've changed, sir. You used to fight to prove people wrong. Now you're fighting to prove something right." He chuckled softly. "Maybe winning changes what you want to win for." As they toasted, the office door opened, and in walked a woman Malcolm hadn't expected to ever see again, Alyssa Beck. Dressed simply, nervously clutching her bag, eyes downcast but determined, Naomi froze. Should I? No, Malcolm said quietly. Let her in. Alyssa took a shaky breath. Mr. Reed, I just came to thank you. Not for what you said, but for what you did after. You could have ruined me. Instead, you gave me time to understand what I did wrong. He studied her, not with anger, but with something deeper. Pity. No. Compassion. Sit down, he said. She did, trembling slightly. I watched your press conference, she said, voice cracking, and it hit me. You weren't angry because you were insulted. You were angry because you'd spent your life proving people wrong, and for 1 second I made you feel unseen again. Malcolm nodded slowly. You're right. You didn't just insult me. You reminded me of every locked door I ever had to kick open. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry, sir, he sighed. Apologies don't change the past, but understanding does. If you really want to make it right, then work for me. She blinked. What? Naomi looked startled too. You said you wanted to learn, Malcolm continued. So learn from the person you judged. Join our diversity and inclusion initiative. Help make sure the next generation doesn't repeat your mistake. Alyssa stared at him, speechless. I don't deserve that chance. Neither did I, Malcolm said, standing. But someone once gave it to me anyway. He extended his hand. Slowly, trembling, she took it. Weeks turned into months again. The Reed Fellowship launched nationwide. Dozens of young entrepreneurs were lifted from forgotten neighborhoods into boardrooms that once ignored them. Malcolm and Alyssa worked side by side, not as enemies, not even as friends, but as two people rebuilding something bigger than either of them. Sometimes Naomi would catch him staring at the city from his window, quiet and still. Do you ever think about that day anymore? She asked one evening. He smiled faintly. Every day, but not because it hurt, because it reminded me where I came from and how far I can still go. One rainy night, Malcolm walked through the same mall, his mall, the place where it all began. He passed the jewelry store, now refurbished and renamed Reed and So. Fine luxury. Inside, customers admired displays while employees chatted, laughter echoing softly. And there, near the entrance, stood a plaque. This building stands as proof that dignity has no price tag, and ownership is the loudest apology. Malcolm touched the edge of the plaque, his reflection merging with the gold lettering. A boy approached him, maybe 12, wearing worn-out sneakers but bright eyes. Sir, the boy said, are you Mr. Reed? Malcolm smiled. Yes. Who are you, young man? My mom said you're the reason I can get a scholarship one day. I just wanted to say thank you. Malcolm bent down, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Then promise me something. When you own your first store, don't let anyone tell you who you are. The boy nodded. I promise. As the boy ran off, Malcolm looked up at the mall's glass ceiling. The rain tapped softly against it, like applause from heaven. He whispered to himself, that's the real profit. Days later, Forbes ran a cover story. Malcolm Reed, the man who bought his own redemption. But if you asked him, he'd tell you redemption was never for sale. It was earned. One act of grace at a time. That night, as the city glowed beneath him, Malcolm closed his laptop and looked out the window for the last time that day. The skyline didn't just shine. It reflected. Every light was a story, every building a memory. He smiled softly and said to himself, once they saw a thief, now they see a teacher. That's legacy. And with that, Malcolm Reed turned off the lights in his office, a man who had once been humiliated in public, now walking quietly into immortality.